Let's get a quick take on the latest terrorist attack in Europe, where a truck plowed through a Bastille Day crowd, killing over 80 people and injuring scores of others. Patty Calhoun from Westward, I know we're getting tired of kind of starting the show with more of this kind of epic bad news from around the world. But as you look at the situation in Nice and in France, do you think this is going to cause actually a bigger reaction from governments, from allies, especially one of the key allies of France is the United States?
Well, and you also begin to see just how many different things can become weapons. So you might be able to ban guns. Are we going to see a filibuster on the Senate floor against refrigerator trucks? I mean, it is so difficult to figure out how to keep the citizenry safe in any country, and then add to it that it happened on Bastille Day in France. It just adds to the tragedy.
David Kopel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School. What's the right response from the United States to support its ally in France?
Oh, President Obama's already got Air Force One warming up, and it's going to take James Taylor over to sing "You've Got a Friend" again. For a legitimate response for what has to be done, Ronald K. Noble, the former head of Interpol, has said, and I co-taught a course with him at New York University back in the 1990s, two things. First of all, you have to do more target hardening like Israel has done and France was doing, but you know, there's still more, and it's harsh to live in a society where there's that many checkpoints and things, but his view is that that's a necessary thing. It's certainly not sufficient in itself, and his view is that based on, for example, the Westgate Mall massacre in Kenya, where hundreds of lives were saved because there were armed citizens there, that's the second thing that needs to be done. And of course, the truck, actually the driver of the truck was the perpetrator, not the truck itself, stopped when the driver was shot enough times, but he went for over a mile before there was enough police in the right positions to shoot him. If you have more people who can start shooting the terrorist immediately, the terrorists stop sooner. But it's certainly going to be, you can't count on governments to do anything. Obama hasn't been very effective about this. He apologized for killing with a drone strike, the guy who wrote the Al-Qaeda magazine article, which laid out the technique for these attacks using trucks.
Penn Tate joins us, attorney with QTAC Rock, also a longtime state lawmaker. I've heard it was some reports, Penn, that the attack here in Nice, there in Nice and in Istanbul might be signs of actually a threatened ISIS, that there's actually been progress in finding them in Syria and Iraq, that this might be lashing out from there. Can we take hope in that it actually might be weakening, or is it going to get worse before it gets better?
Well, I think it'll get worse before it gets better, consistent with just the concept you put forward. I think that efforts to go after ISIS and ISIL and others have ramped up and have been more effective, but these groups aren't going to go away quietly. They aren't going to, throw a white flag out and surrender and say, gee, you've killed enough of our people. We think we'll quit and go home now. For better or for worse, it's going to have to call for the complete elimination of these threats, and I think David's right in that regard. I do think we've made some progress, but the tragedy in Nice and what's happened in Turkey and other places continue to tell us that we live in a global society where not being safe is not the point. Not having a consensus in terms of the actions that need to be taken to keep us all safe wherever we are is the point. And so, we spent some time the last few weeks talking about the European Union and their financial meltdown and crisis with the UK withdrawing. There are other reasons to remain unified in this global environment, not just financial management. And so I think that lesson's being driven home again this time.
Ed Sealiver Brown's at the panel from Denver Business Journal. Wrap it up for us.
Well, I think the U.S., especially during the Bush administration, had called on its allies to help it fight back against terrorist organizations, especially after we were attacked in 2001. I think maybe it ought to be listening this time. If France is really, and President Hollande has said before, it is time to declare war on ISIS. And if they can come up with a ground plan, ask us to help them come up with a game plan that could take the fight to them, I think it may be time that we start listening, because while France and Belgium and Istanbul have been the sites of these attacks, it is only a matter of time before something is carried out here on the U.S. soil.